Good morning to you. I'm Danilo Evangelista, and welcome to today's tropical weather outlook for Tuesday, May 26th, 2026. Today, not much is happening in the Atlantic and the Pacific, the Eastern Pacific, and we'll go over those basins later on. But today, we're going to take an adventure a little bit to the Western Pacific, where there is activity happening and a major typhoon might be brewing. And I'm going to also tie it into how this is going to potentially affect ENSO over the next several weeks as we continue to see this pattern shift more towards El Nino as we expected in the Pacific. Let's start off, though, by taking a look at the welcome page to cyclonic weather because they have a nice map of all of the activity that's happening in the world right now, kind of like the map that the University of Wisconsin website also has, but I decided to use cyclonic weather today, but I will probably use University of Wisconsin for later updates. But you can see here in the Western Pacific, Invest 99W, this is what we are watching, and the models are showing that this might potentially brew into a major typhoon, and it is of interest not just because it's going to be a major typhoon. We expect that to happen in the Westpac this year, especially given how strong of an El Nino we're potentially going to have. But according to the latest model guidance out there, this might potentially be a threat to land, namely Japan, especially if you look at what some of the model guidance are showing, which I will show you here in just a little bit. But Invest 99W on the map right now. Here's a satellite picture of it, and we still have some time before this is going to really get going. This is very, very broad right now in terms of its cyclonic vorticity. In the Western Pacific, a lot of these typhoons sometimes tend to originate from very, very broad monsoonal lows, which take some time to develop. But once they develop and once they consolidate, they can turn into some quite eye-dropping, or I should say jaw-dropping typhoons, which I'm pretty sure, especially all hurricane trackers know, the Western Pacific likes to produce. And we're probably going to get a lot of them this year. And maybe this impending system might be one of those jaw-dropping, eye-candy typhoons in the Western Pacific. But it is very broad right now. But taking a look at the model guidance here, it is certainly expected to consolidate. This is the European ensembles, and as you see, first you kind of see how it gets wrapped up in the monsoon here in the Western Pacific. It kind of, takes a curve, kind of rotates a little bit upward, and then it probably consolidates in about, 1 or 2 days here. And then it really strengthens. A lot of the model ensembles of the European are showing this potentially becoming a pretty strong storm. Some ensembles here even going as high as 70, 80, 100 knots, as you can see here. So this definitely has major typhoon potential, even super typhoon potential. And super typhoon means a storm of 130 knots or stronger in the Western Pacific. So in our equivalent, that is 150 miles per hour, which is a high-end Cat 4 and stronger. And I'll show you the sea surface temperature anomalies in a little bit. I think it is definitely possible that we will see a very strong typhoon out of this. But especially, look where this gets strong and look where this gets near. And in fact, some of the ensembles even have this going right over some portions of the country of Japan. And obviously Japan is a pretty populated country, and maybe this with my very rough Japan geography, I think honestly where this area goes over to might even be close to where Tokyo is. And Tokyo is a very, very, very populated city. In fact, one of the most populated areas in the world. So the fact that the ensembles get very close to that area of Japan is certainly something that we need to be watching for over the next several days with this system. And even with the Google AI ensembles too. In fact, what's very interesting is that the Google AI ensembles are even more aggressive on showing a potentially strong typhoon out of this system as well. In fact, if you look at the most of the ensembles here, within the next 7 days, especially as we get towards around, let's see here, day 5 and day 6, you definitely start to see a lot of these strong ensembles here showing up for Invest 99W. So there is definitely quite a bit of confidence that we might get a strong storm out of this. And taking a look at the model intensity forecast right now, the HAFS models, not as aggressive yet, but the HWRF, that's what this HWFI here, that's the HWRF intensity forecast, takes us up to category 3 strength right now. And you know how these, especially with these tropical cyclones, as they begin to intensify and as we start to see them come together, many times the intensity forecast just continues to go up and up and up. And I certainly would not be surprised if that's what happens here. And just taking a look at the sea surface temperature anomalies as well, you can see in the West Pac we have quite a bit decently above normal sea surface temperature anomalies, but probably one of the biggest features that is helping with the activity right now, and I'll tell you in a little bit, it's probably going to it's definitely going to help fuel even more activity throughout the rest of the year. But we have some pretty warm sea surface temperature anomalies in the Western Pacific, and then of course we have our developing El Nino here in the equatorial Pacific, and obviously that is going to bring general favorable conditions to the entire Pacific basin. And you could also see as well, we definitely have a bunch of these warm sea surface temperature anomalies here in the Western Pacific, especially the eastern portion of the Western Pacific here. So that is definitely going to fuel a very favorable background state for activity in the Pacific. And we're definitely starting to see the fruits of this right now with this invest in the Pacific here. And kind of related to how El Nino is developing right now, we have very, very strong westerly wind bursts in the Pacific, especially near the date line right now. And, this tweet here from Cyclone Guy 15 highlights that. He says, another major typhoon could be brewing in the Pacific. Model analysis and satellite imagery shows distinct maxima and low-level westerlies straddling the equator, which has helped boistering cyclonic flow and convective activity. So westerly winds, which is helping fuel our El Nino right now. And we've had these very strong westerly winds, especially more towards the Western Pacific for the last several weeks, and especially last month, we saw that helped fuel a pretty, quite jaw-dropping typhoon, if you remember that. Don't quite remember the name of what the typhoon was, but it was a very strong storm that happened last month, and it happened because of very strong westerly wind bursts associated with our developing El Nino. So not only are we going to be talking about, a typhoon here that is going to be coming out of these westerly wind bursts, but the sea surface temperature anomalies as well, especially in the Nino 3.4 region, should probably skyrocket in the coming weeks. We're going to have a very strong westerly wind burst in the Pacific, and that's probably going to fuel, in my opinion, an active period in the Pacific in terms of tropical cyclone activity, especially in the Western Pacific, probably starting next month, and then it's probably only going to get progressively more active as we get into July and August. And that'll happen as this, El Nino strengthens as well. Things are really going to start getting active here in the Pacific in the next several days, and we are already seeing that with Invest 99W here, which once again could be a major threat and a major storm brewing in the Pacific. But elsewhere in the Atlantic right now, as I mentioned before, nothing is happening just yet. No activity is expected in the next 7 days. Obviously, we are watching the Caribbean and Gulf of America and the Southeast Coast, as we're going to have a surge of moisture in the first week of June next week. And that's definitely going to bring a lot of rain and moisture to Florida and the Southeast and the Bahamas and the Northern Caribbean. But in terms of actual development out of that, it's starting to look less and less likely, in my opinion, that we will actually get an organized tropical system here in the immediate future. But I venture to guess that we will probably have to watch continuously as we progress into June in the Western Atlantic here, especially off the Southeast coast, because I do believe something will happen, and it's probably not far off from happening in the Atlantic. But in the Eastern Pacific as well, not much is happening right now. Even though we have favorable conditions because of El Nino beginning to set in, and that's definitely, definitely showing its fruit in the Western Pacific. Not much is happening in the Eastern Pacific right now, but I also venture to guess that this is definitely going to change in just a matter of a few weeks. So, be prepared for that. In the Atlantic, satellite imagery-wise, not much happening right now. You can see that we have very strong wind shear cutting through the basin, especially by the cloud motion here on the satellite coming from the Caribbean and going into the MDR. And also just generally not a lot of convection in the MDR right now. I mean, that's kind of typical this time of year in most years, but I'm kind of pointing it out to say that that probably will be a reoccurring trend this season, is a lot of wind shear, a lot of dry air, especially through the MDR. And then you have some convection here in the Gulf of Mexico, and definitely some thunderstorms and convective activity popping up off of Florida and the southeast. And as I said before, you guys are going to get a lot of rain and shower activity over the next several weeks. So I guess we're starting to see the signs of that. In the Eastern Pacific, not much happening as well. We have some convective activity here and there, but again, lots of very, very strong wind shear. We have the subtropical jets screaming through the Pacific right now. So things are not quite yet favorable. But obviously, again, in just a matter of a few weeks, I think this is probably going to change, and change very quickly. In the Atlantic and Pacific, in terms of the tropical waves that are out there right now, we have a few. We have a tropical wave in the central MDR right now, and that's obviously going to continue to traverse westward, probably crash into the southern islands and bring some showers and thunderstorms. You know the whole deal. But again, nothing is really expected to develop right now. A tropical wave in the Caribbean, and also a tropical wave entering the Eastern Pacific. So that's probably what this feature right here is, and we're definitely going to have to watch these tropical waves as the weeks go by, especially as more of them, traverse the Atlantic and enter the Pacific, especially once the Eastern Pacific basin becomes much more favorable, because that's probably going to help, fuel a lot of development there. But again, in terms of development right now in the next week, nothing really is fully able to consolidate. I mean, we do have this area in the Caribbean here, once again, associated with the Central American gyre. And you can see that gyre really come together here in the next few days as we start getting cyclonic vorticity build over Central America, and we just get an area in general of broad turning. And you can see that by the wind bars here, we have them going in this direction, and then they turn, and then they kind of go back the other way here. So we have a broad area of turning developing over Central America. Classic sign of a Central American gyre here, and then it lifts northward as we get into the end of this week and into the beginning of next week. And, something does try to consolidate here in the Atlantic, and then it lifts northward, but the thing is, it doesn't really last. And as I mentioned before, one of the biggest reasons why is, take a look at the wind shear here. We have quite the wind shear, especially in terms of strong upper level winds off the southeast coast. And again, just strong upper level winds are not very favorable for tropical development. And I mean, you could see when something does try to happen here in the Caribbean, because wind shear and upper level wind values are definitely on the lower end, and that's when you, again, really see things try to consolidate here on the model. But again, once it runs into those stronger upper level winds, especially off the southeast coast and, near Florida, things just really fall apart. So I'm not necessarily sure if this system right here is going to be the one to watch. And then in the Eastern Pacific, really quickly moving through the model here, nothing is expected in the next 7 days. So the Atlantic and the Pacific kind of on the quiet side right now, and hopefully it stays that way, but obviously it won't, especially in the Eastern Pacific. And then, of course, in the Western Pacific, we have a major typhoon that we will be watching very closely over the next several weeks. So the tropics slowly beginning to heat up, but again, nothing too crazy just as of yet. But that's going to do it for today's video. Hope you enjoyed what you saw today. If you did, I would really appreciate if you like this video. Comment your thoughts below. Any questions you have as well, leave them in the chat. And subscribe to the channel if you like what you saw today, because again, we'll be doing these videos on a daily basis. So if you like that and you're interested in that, please make sure to subscribe to the channel. Thanks for watching. Have a great day. Enjoy your day outside, especially if you have a nice day today. Even if you have like classes or work or something like that, definitely be sure to try to enjoy the day, at least at some point. Not doing anything stressful today. And just live life, and hopefully you'll be back tomorrow with me for another tropical update. See you then.